Hello everybody and welcome back to Form Check Friday. Hope y'all are doing well. I have been cutting my own hair for about 3 months now and I'm strongly considering shaving a handlebar mustache into my face. So I hope everybody's doing well, or as well as I am out there. Welcome to Form Check Friday. So this is the series where we take your viewer submitted videos, we put them up on this screen behind me, and yeah, I give you all some coaching advice. We try to help everybody become more efficient lifters. Now before we get started, I did want to mention I'm part of a team of coaches known as Calgary Barbell, and if you're interested in checking out what we have to offer for coaching services, head over to calgarybarbell.com. We just redid our website and it is pretty slick. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off where we left off last week. Now last week we left off with Henry here. Let me get this pulled up. And Henry sent in his squat. We actually had this, we left off last episode with Henry's squat and had everybody leave some comments in regards to what they thought Henry could improve. Now, there were a lot of insightful comments, and a few of which I think mentioned that honestly his squat looks pretty well, looks pretty good. So Henry says he was a football player previously. Let's skip forward to the actual squat here again. And it was wondering, he says he gets a little bit compulsive about his technique and maybe overthinks it, and I think kind of admitted that. He has trouble getting his elbows a little bit lower, or keeping his elbows a little bit lower, which he thinks he should, and has trouble kind of, I guess, keeping them down. He also mentioned that he feels he has a pretty pronounced sticking point on the way up, and honestly, Henry, I'm here to tell you that things look much better than I think you think they do. So this little bit of angle in the elbows, I don't think is a bad thing, right? I think that when we get to the bottom of the squat, we're still almost in line with the torso, and I think there's a certain degree of, like, you know, different people are going to move differently, and I don't see this as a huge thing of needing to change that. Now, if every time you hit the bottom we could see that bar like roll you forward and loosen the upper back quite a bit, then maybe it'd be something more to, you know, kind of investigate and think and cue more about. But as it stands, I think you do a pretty good job with your upper back. We could maybe work on bracing. I think we're getting pretty kind of overextended out of the hole, so maybe there's some merit in thinking a little more kind of ribs down in the front bracing and filling out that belt a little bit more. But overall, like, I don't think you have an exaggerated sticking point. I think sometimes it slows down at the point of least biomechanical advantage, just because of physics, like because of the way that things move. It's not necessarily that you're doing anything wrong. It's just when a weight gets heavy, it slows down at some point. And I don't see an over-exaggerated or very even pronounced sticking point there. So overall, I probably wouldn't change much. The one thing I would do is maybe play with bringing your stance in a little bit. It looks to me like it's pretty wide. But again, there's nothing inherently wrong with a wide stance squat. I would just be interested to see what would happen if you mess with that a little bit. Maybe your sticking point would feel a little less pronounced, but honestly, overall, I probably wouldn't change much. I think you got a really good squat going on here, Henry, so don't overthink it. All right, our next lift here comes from James, and James is, as you can see, doing some bench press. You can also probably tell that James is a pretty tall, pretty long-limbed guy. He says he's 6'4", focusing mostly on hypertrophy training at the moment. He's trying to get a bit of an arch, but he says he's having a hard time with that. And this is 70 kilos for 5. He also noted that his elbows tend to flare out a little bit, which, yeah, let's take a look here. So I think the big thing with the arch is number one, this is super far up, even for a tall guy. So I'm not sure if these are adjustable at all. But if you can bring that down, you're probably going to have an easier time getting your shoulder blades kind of socketed down into your low back, or more close to your low back. And that's going to help you get a bit of an arch. Now, the other thing is, tall guys, you just kind of get screwed with leg drive, right? You're going to have to bench on the same bench height as a guy who's like 5'5". When you get to competition, if that's, you know, something that's in your wheelhouse. So what I would do is I would work on trying to get your feet back a little bit more, and try to like bring your knees out so you can really kind of like open your legs up a little bit, pull them back underneath you more so you can contribute to ideally getting your knee a little bit lower than your hip, squeeze the crap out of your glutes, and try to get all of your tension up onto your shoulder blades, like the tops of your shoulder blades. If you can feel the pressure on your upper traps a little bit, then you're going to be getting a little bit more of an arch. Another really common cue you'll hear me throw around is to try to bring your chest up to the bar. And the other thing is, like, unfortunately, it looks like this bar is pretty narrow, like pretty short. It's not very long. It looks like you're having to take a pretty narrow grip on it. And anybody who's been watching this series for any period of time knows that I'm a big fan of telling people to widen their grip. So that would be one thing I would investigate as well, is, you know, I don't know if you can get much wider on there, maybe a little bit. It's a really thin bar, so it's going to be kind of harder to control in the hands. You know, it's not an ideal setup, but it's one of those things where it's like, you got a bar, you can bench, that's good, do it. Even if you're at a bit of a disadvantage with a narrow grip being a tall guy, just like keep getting the work in. So yeah, if you can get a little bit more pressure on your upper traps, bring your chest up to the bar a little bit more, work on the leg drive. I think it's going to help you get a bit more of an arch, which is going to help the sort of inherent disadvantage that you have, and the position you're having to get into at the bottom in order to touch your chest. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. And in terms of the elbows shooting out, it's happening to a normal extent, and I do think that if you just widen that grip up a little bit, you're probably going to feel a little more kind of well oriented under the bar. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Now, before I move on, I know you're all looking at me like, ooh, he's looking pretty damn good in that t-shirt. It fits really nice. And this is actually a blank of the apparel that we're getting printed right now. So it is coming, I promise you. CBB apparel, it's happening. All right, up next, we have some deadlifts from Tiffany. Now, Tiffany is doing 210 for a triple here. She says that she gets a bit of rounding on heavier sets. She's not sure if it's too much. She says she's not looking to compete, and this is with about 7 months or so of lifting experience. So let's take a look here. It looks like to me we're losing a little bit of back position, but it doesn't look like it's excessive. It's not something where I would be like, oh, you know, you have to worry about that in terms of efficiency or injury risk or anything like that. I think the biggest thing here is probably that because you're longer from here to here and from here to here, if you were to widen your stance just a little bit, that might allow you to kind of be a little closer to the bar. So you're going to be able to maybe take some of the demand of that back stability and strength out of the equation a little bit. So I would widen your stance a little bit on your conventional. The other thing I would try, and you know, hopefully I don't get too much heat for this, but I would try some sumo deadlifts, right? A lot of the times, even just doing sumo deadlifts as a conventional puller can help you feel out some of the positions a little bit better or differently. So yeah, definitely maybe incorporate some sumo into your repertoire and see how that goes for you. But I really think that your deadlift overall, pattern-wise, looks really, really good. The one thing I'm seeing here is when you pull into this position, you're going to a lot of extension. I would try to like embrace that little bit of flexion, that little bit of rounding, right? Try to start with that same position that you have here. Like, this is a great position, no issues there. I would maybe work on pulling the lats down a little bit, or pulling the shoulder blades down, right? It's gonna feel like you're getting a little more out of your lats there. And see if that helps to kind of stabilize the trunk just a little bit and get, you know, some goodness, some more back stability out of there. But other than that, like, I think you're doing a good job of kind of pushing it off the floor. You know, you're creating tension and pulling the slack out of the bar. But yeah, try some sumo. Don't worry about that back rounding. In fact, even lean into it a little bit. You know, allow yourself to brace a little more neutral instead of extended. And yeah, just keep going. Your pull looks good. Our next lifter is Maria. Maria is doing some squats here. She's been powerlifting for 2 years. And she says squat is the most challenging lift for her. This is 80 kilos for 4 reps. She says she finds herself leaning too far forward too often. So as she gets through the sets, you know, the bar kind of pulls her forward. And the number one thing I'm going to say, even before she begins the squat, is that, yeah, our shoulders are tilted pretty far forward, right? So not even the elbows, but the actual shoulder itself is oriented really far forward. We're very protracted in the shoulder blades. So the number one thing I would do is get those shoulders back more. Retract those shoulder blades. Try to pull those shoulder blades back a little bit. And I'll maybe try to resize this just a bit so you can get, there we go, the whole image in frame, or mostly, anyway. And yeah, I think just pulling those shoulder blades back is going to be a really big boost in the strength and stability, positional advantage of your upper back. So start there. It looks like as we go through here, yeah, because we're in that position, we're starting off already pulled a little bit forward. In terms of competition standard, this does look like it's maybe a little bit on the line, perhaps a little bit high depth-wise. So I would also work on that. Maybe not. It's kind of hard to see the top of her knee there as she sits into the bottom position. Other than that upper back position, I think your squat looks really good. But I do think that upper back position, you know, if like you said, the bar pulls you forward, you find yourself leaning forward too far, like you said in your email, I think that's probably going to be the number one thing to look at, is right there, right? As we hit the bottom, you can see that bar begin to pull you forward, right? We come down, the bar is a little bit further like back if we were to draw a straight line there, not like the line that I just drew. You know, you can see the bar is way out here on the way up. Not that I put too much stock in bar path for squat training, but I do think in this case it illustrates my point of, yes, we're getting thrown pretty far forward, and I think it's because of the way that our shoulder blades are underneath the bar right here. So a couple things we can try in order to make it easier for you to get a different or better position with your upper back. Number one, I would try widening your grip. If you are wrapping your thumb around the bar, I would try maybe going thumbs behind the bar. Sometimes that helps to make a little bit more sense of positioning with the bar on the back. And I would maybe play with the bar position, higher or lower, and see if you can find somewhere where it feels a little more stable. I think one of the big reasons people throw their elbows back like that and their shoulders inherently go forward when the elbows go back that much is because they feel like the bar is going to slip off their back if they don't. So if the bar feels like it's going to slip off your back unless you keep your elbows up really high, then maybe we need to allow the torso to lean a little bit more in the start position so that instead of sliding down your back, it's anchored into your back a little bit better, right? Gravity just kind of helps there. But the other thing is, yes, definitely trying to bunch up the muscles of the upper back by pulling the shoulder blades together to create a little shelf for that bar to rest on. Okay, next up is Arman. And Arman is doing some bench press. So Arman's doing 195 for 6 here, pause. He says he wants to try to work on staying tighter, and he doesn't feel like he gets enough leg drive with his feet down, so that's why we're in this sort of like toe pick position here. Excuse me. Okay, so number one, I would continue to work on this leg drive. I do think that there is an inherent lack of stability with toe picking, and you can see here illustrated by the fact that you have to keep moving your feet around throughout the set, right? Inch your feet out just enough so that they're flat, and I think you might be able to get a little more stability there. As it stands right now, the fact that you're having to kind of dance around on them a little bit, I think betrays the fact that we are maybe not as tight as we could be. The other thing is that the upper body tightness really kind of isn't there, right? So I see you've got a handoff, which is great, but you can see, yeah, the shoulders really roll forward out of the rack. The shoulders really pop up. And I think if you take a little bit more time with your setup, right? Get your shoulder blades into a good position, get a solid grip on the bar, and then ease the bar out of the rack. Don't worry about punching it out of the rack or unracking aggressively, because that's when the shoulder's gonna go out of position. So try to unrack with just the triceps or just the elbows. Try to just pop it out, just the elbows, a little bit smoother out of the rack. Excuse me, I'm talking a lot, I'm drying myself out here. The other thing here is I really think we could keep a little bit more depression. I think we could get the chest up to the bar. I think if we looked at the side, it would be like the upper back's kind of like this, and then we have an arch in the low back. And what we want to do is we want to try to get this part up so that we look more like this from the side. We get what I've heard referred to as like a global extension. And basically what that means is that hips are extended, low back is extended, and upper back is extended. So one of the things that I was talking to a fellow coach about is the idea of letting the ribs go, right? The idea that, okay, in powerlifting and even throughout this video, I've talked a number of times about needing to keep the ribs down, or wanting to keep the ribs down as a part of bracing. Don't do that in the bench press. We don't need that. We don't need ribs down. We need ribs up. Flare it. Open it up. Get as big as you can in your chest and try to bring that chest up high, high, high to the bar. The other thing is during the pauses, we're kind of relaxing. And what we would ideally see there is the creation of a very stable and tight position, almost like we're winding a spring into the bottom, as opposed to coming down and resting on the chest. The other thing here, yeah, I would just work on staying a lot tighter. And I know that's a super general way of saying things, and it seems like you kind of already know that that's one of your issues, but yeah, a lot of the lack of tightness is coming from the upper body. And I also think we're doing ourselves a disservice with what we're doing with the feet. Just generally speaking, I don't think people get as tight with like a toe pick like that. It's just kind of my experience, my take on things. I think there's a way that you can get that same like extension and kind of forced tightness, but with your feet on the ground, so you have a little bit more stability, so you're not having to like shake around and wobble and move around. So play around with foot positioning, maybe go a little bit wider, maybe go out here. I know a lot of people like to dig their heels in kind of like right behind or beside the upright here. For some people that helps a lot. And you know what I'm going to say, maybe try widening that grip. In your case, I wouldn't widen it much. So here's one of the things I look for when I tell someone to widen their grip, is this forearm angle in the bottom, right? With, what was his name earlier? James. With James, his elbows came out here and we had this kind of angle in the forearm. So that tells me like, oh, what if we put our hand here? You know, we'd be here pretty naturally. Whereas for yourself, it's very slight, but I do think we could widen like maybe one finger's width and be pretty comfortable there. You know, it's going to allow you to change your touch position just slightly, which might be an advantage, might be a disadvantage. It's tough to say, but at the very least, I would program some wider grip bench as an accessory and just see how it feels, right? But we really have to work on keeping that upper back tightness in the shoulder blades, specifically as we unrack and throughout the set. All right, and our next video here comes from Patrick. So Patrick is doing some sumo deadlifts for the first time here. He says he's 22 years old, been powerlifting for 2 years. This is his first time pulling sumo. Okay, there's no need to show off there, Patrick. So Patrick says he's pulled 300 kilos at 76 kilos before, which is incredibly impressive. That's obviously conventional, which many internet denizens would argue is way more impressive than pulling it sumo. This is 272.5 for 4 beltless, and he's wondering if I have any tips rather. So his hips, he says, start super high, although he says that doesn't seem to be an issue for him, and he's wondering if I have any advice for him. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna leave the audience with this display of strength. So I want everybody to head down into the comments section below. Let us know if you see anything. You know, how do you think Patrick can improve his sumo deadlift here? Is there any sort of tips or suggestions or things that you all notice that he could do to improve his technique? If so, leave them in the comments below. And next week we will start with Patrick's deadlifts, and I will give my critique on it all. Again, if you're interested in coaching or you're looking to have a paid form check that's just you for like an hour or half an hour or whatever, head over to calgarybarbell.com. You can take a look at the coaching services we offer there. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We will see everybody in the next video next week, starting with Patrick's video. Take it easy, everyone.